Hello, everyone. Nathaniel Gavronski here, and I am in Paris, Kentucky, and Davis County, Iowa. This one's for you. I am standing right next to the headstone of U.S. Senator Garrett Davis, the namesake of Davis County. Now, a lot of people don't really know where the origins are from a lot of these county names, especially the individuals that are clearly not from a battle or some native tribe. They're an individual, unless it's Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln. A lot of people have a hard time, kind of figuring out, well, who is this person and why was this county named after them? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about why Davis County, Iowa is named after Senator Garrett Davis and who Garrett Davis was as a person. So we're going to start off here in Kentucky. And he was born on September 10th, 1801, in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, just a little ways away from here in Montgomery County. And he had an older brother named Amos, who studied law, became a lawyer, and served in the state of Kentucky legislature throughout the 1820s, and even the U.S. House of Representatives from 1833 to 1835, when he died untimely while he was campaigning for re-election. Amos is buried over in their hometown of Mount Sterling. Garrett Davis followed in his older brother's footsteps and wanted to become a lawyer. And after preparatory school, started studying law. He would become a deputy of the county clerk of court for Montgomery County initially, before moving to Paris, which is Bourbon County, where he would start back up being the deputy within the clerk of court's office for Bourbon County. Now he would become a member of the bar in 1823, and then he would kind of go away from the county courthouse and do have his own private practice. Now, the family was staunch anti-Jacksonian politics, staunch anti-Andrew Jackson, period. Most of Kentucky was. In fact, Tennessee, Jackson's home state, who's actually from Carolinas, also predominantly opposed most of Jackson's policies. Now, coming from working in law, you do have a tendency to kind of get involved in politics because politicians write the laws that you're practicing and you're arguing in court. So while his older brother Amos was serving in the U.S. House of Representatives, Garrett actually got elected to serve in the state House of Representatives from the same time period of 1833 to 1835. He declined re-election once his brother died. After serving in the state house, he kind of came back into just serving um, as a private practice lawyer here in Bourbon County. He was a farmer. He he was that kind of country farmer, country lawyer type of guy. Um, Going from this process, uh, after some time, in 1839, it was decided, he was going to get back involved, and he ran for the U.S. House of Representatives. He won. He won as a Whig. Now, why he became a Whig was because, again, partially his anti-Andrew Jackson stance. One of his close allies and kind of mentors was Henry Clay, also of Kentucky fame. Now, Clay helped form the Whig Party, and so it was predominantly determined that Mr. Davis was going to be a member of the Whig Party. And so he joined the U.S. House of Representatives as a Whig. And he would serve in the House of Representatives from his after his election all the way up until 1847. In 1846, he declined to run for another term, and once his term ended in 47, he returned back to Paris, Kentucky, returning to that country farmer slash lawyer profession that he had. Now, while he was a member of the Congress as a Whig, he was the chairman of a very important committee on U.S. territories. This this post and this chairmanship would be very important to why Davis County picks him as their namesake. So after he leaves Washington in 47, he kind of stays away from politics. The Whigs are trying to get him to become lieutenant governor. There's another party that's trying to get him to become governor. They nominate him for president. All these nominations he outright declines. He's done. He kind of wants to just stay back. He's enjoying his life as a farmer, as a kind of a country lawyer. This is what he wants to do with his life. But that starts to change. He is promoting and he is campaigning for Henry Clay. He keeps Henry Clay in the U.S. Senate, and also pushes for Clay as the U.S. presidential candidate. He does kind of stay active in as far as leading his nomination, not nomination, but like his I would like to see this person elected. I'm going to endorse this person. He was kind of a local kingmaker for local politics. In 1849, he actually serves in the Kentucky State Constitutional Convention. Now, this is the second constitution that Kentucky is constructing, second one out of their total of four. Now, this convention in 1849, he's a participant in it, but he doesn't like the final document. One thing he doesn't really like about it is that it removes term limits from the governor's office. It also turns things over from being having electors determine some of the higher up positions like governor and state senators to directly elected by the people. And he feared that might lead to more of a mob rule to where the House of Representatives could be directly elected, but the Senate and the governor, much like the way the presidency and the U.S. Senate was done by a group of electors, or the state Senate, the state legislature itself would elect the U.S. senators, and the electoral college would elect the presidents. And he kind of liked the way that worked, and he didn't want Kentucky to go away from that at the local level. So he opposed it unsuccessfully, and that constitution did become law of the land in Kentucky in 1850. After this process, he's out of the picture. He's not really participating. He's actually at this time also being accused of being an abolitionist. The guy had slaves. There's no hiding that. He was a slave owner. There wasn't a whole lot of writings about him being an abolitionist. He kind of liked the status quo. He did believe that slaves were personal property, and he was very much, in favor of private property rights. And he believed the federal government's ability to remove private property from a citizen without due process was unconstitutional. Well, I think the Civil War was pretty much what the epiphany of what would become due process. Well, the guy named John Breckinridge is serving in the U.S. Senate from Kentucky at this time. And once war breaks out, Garrett, who is now a Democrat, because the Whigs have now fallen apart, they're no longer really a viable party. Breckinridge, who is supporting the Confederacy, wants to secede from the Union, is thrown out of the Senate by the state. Garrett actually helps prevent Kentucky from seceding from the Union. That had been about staying in the Union, but he doesn't think that the Union should have the ability to remove slaves from their rightful owners. And even though he serves in the U.S. Senate from the state of Kentucky as one of Unionist Democrats, he does end up breaking from Lincoln in 1863 during the Civil War amendments debates. He's actually like one of 6 senators that opposed the 13th Amendment specifically because it gives citizenship to all the slaves. He also believed that abolition of slaves in the Union loyal states should not be forced. That it should be a more gradual timetable, up to like a century later. Clearly, this was not within what the federal government had in mind, and Kentucky and Missouri and Maryland and states like that were going to have to give up their slaves, just as the defeated states of the South were going to have to give up their slaves. So by this time, Mr. Davis here, this specifically here is his tomb, is his headstone. Very hard to read. I'll show you a better picture of it. It's kind of seen by his colleagues as backwards, outdated, kind of a lost cause for a reasonable opposition party. Because by this time, the Republicans owned absolutely everything and controlled everything in Washington, D.C. So a reasonable opposition party was a group of Democrats, some that are even coming from the South. They're like, hey, you can kind of challenge us on stuff, but it's going to be kind of our way. Anyway, he was a headache for pretty much everyone in Washington at this time, and he was no longer seen as being that noble statesman, but more of that, country bumpkin, that, rural lawyer, that backwards guy. But Kentucky disagreed. They kept supporting him. Kentucky actually reelected him to the U.S. Senate in 1867. He would continue to serve in the U.S. Senate until his death on September 22nd, 1872. Upon his death, he would be laid to rest here next to his second wife. His first wife's stone is over here, and his alley has been quite damaged. He was married 2 times in his life. His first wife was the Trimble, which is the family plot in which he and his most of his family is laid in Trimbles. His first wife was named Rebecca. She was a daughter of a prominent uh, Supreme Justice lawyer here in Kentucky. She ends up dying, and he ends up marrying Eliza Elliott, and she ends up dying just a couple years before Garrett Davis dies. So she's laid here in the plot along with him and their kids. He had four. Between his two wives, he had four children. He had Rebecca, he had Robert, he had Carrie, and he had Garrett Davis Jr. So talk a little bit about his legacy. He's kind of a mixed bag on where he's placed as far as loyalty to the Union. He did not support the Confederacy. He did not support seceding from the Union. He was backwards on race relations. He was noted for saying that he believed that he, as a white man, was racially superior to that of a black man. Clearly, today, that is not something that is okay to say. During this time period in which he lived, this was a way a lot of whites felt, not just in the South, but in the North as well. There was a lot of problems in the North, especially like in Chicago, with race relations. It wasn't just a Southern thing. Um, so that's a mark on his record. But he was a Union supporter. He did support most of Lincoln's policies. He was a little bit backwards on. He was very backwards on the slavery issue, and there's a few other issues that he might have had a problem with that we today would see as completely unacceptable and inappropriate, and we shouldn't be, supporting him or caring about him or even valuing him at all. But why did Davis County name their county after Garrett Davis? Well, that goes back to when he was a Whig member of the House of Representatives. See, when what is now Iowa used to be the Wisconsin Territory, and Wisconsin, the territory, and Missouri, the state, had a border dispute. Missouri was trying to claim about 9 miles north across the board of the current Iowa-Missouri state border. This conflict would become known as the Honey War. Basically, what happens is Wisconsin leaves Burlington and goes straight up to Madison to never return. President Van Buren has to send the former governor of Ohio, who actually just won the Toledo War against Michigan, between Michigan and Ohio, sends Lucas all the way to Burlington and says, get there, get to Burlington, get a defense going, and find something. Wait, what to call this place? Literally, the very first thing that Iowa does as a thing called Iowa is go to war with the most powerful state in the country. Why the most powerful state? Louisiana, New Orleans is the most important port, probably one of the most important ports in the world at this time. And the Mississippi drains into New Orleans. That's the reason why the U.S. went after the Louisiana Purchase in the first place, was for the port of New Orleans. The Missouri River also cuts through and goes right through St. Louis, joining the Mississippi in St. Louis. It's a very important and very powerful state. The reason why the Missouri has a boot hill is because one guy owned all that land, and he knew how powerful Missouri was going to be and wanted to become part of the state of Missouri. So this was an epic battle of wills between the Iowa Territory and Missouri. And Iowa was a territory, meaning that its territorial governor, its legislature, all of its officers, and its military were all supposed to be funded and paid for by the federal government. The state really wasn't, the territory, unlike a state, really wasn't in charge of paying for those types of things. They really didn't have a mechanism to pay them. So through this plight, Garrett Davis, which is a member of the House of Representatives and the chair of the Department on U.S. Territories, authors a bill in support of paying these soldiers that fought during the Honey War. Now, the Honey War mostly took place in a place called the Hairy Nation. This is mostly what is now Van Buren, Davis, Appanoose, Wayne, and Decatur County, but most of it took place in Van Buren and Davis, especially right along where Highway 1 and Highway 2 intersect. And then also where the Des Moines River runs through Keosauqua. But when they organized Davis County off of Van Buren County on February 17th, 1843, they wanted to show respect to Garrett Davis for trying to help them get their soldiers paid. And as part of the Hairy Nation, they named their new county Davis County in honor of Garrett Davis, where he was still a member of the House of Representatives. I forget, this is 47. he's when he leaves office, they organize on 43. So he's still a Whig, still in the House of Representatives, quite a while before the U.S. Civil War. There are only two counties that are properly named Davis County, Iowa, and then there's a Davis County, Utah, which is named after a captain in one of the Mormon regiments. Not related, not connected at all. During the Civil War, Davis County got accused of naming their county after Confederate President Jefferson Davis, and that was clearly not the case. It was very stated why they named it Davis County. As far as Jefferson Davis is concerned, I believe there are four counties in the old Confederacy that are actually still named after President Jefferson Davis throughout the Old South. But Davis County, Iowa, and Davis County, Utah are not named after Jefferson Davis. Davis County, Iowa is the only county that has any association with Garrett Davis. Um, so that's kind of the story of this, small town rural farmer and rural lawyer that becomes the namesake of, I think, one of the coolest counties in all of Iowa, Davis County. Davis County was also instrumental during the time leading up to the Civil War. Um, Not only did they help push back the Missourians during the Honey War, during Bleeding Kansas, a lot of people from Davis County went to Kansas, along with a lot of people from Missouri, and they started fighting over what was Kansas going to be, a free or a slave state. Now, we all know the Iowans that went down there ended up winning that because Kansas entered the Union as a free state. If you go to Kansas today, you will see a lot of places named after towns in Iowa because people from Iowa moved there and founded towns from where they were from. Leading into the Civil War itself, people from Davis County and Appanoose County and that area, they were very quickly to get to arms, and they actually took on the Missourians very early in the war. In fact, they helped defeat two prominent Missouri pro-Confederate generals, Sterling Price and Marmaduke. Sterling was a recent governor, and Marmaduke would actually become a governor later on. And the Iowa regiments actually helped end a lot of the pro-Confederate regiments and armies in Missouri to help prevent Missouri from seceding itself. So Davis County is clearly a pro-union county, was very much in favor of the Union, and picked Garrett Davis mostly because of his support for the Honey War Harried Nation soldiers during the 1830s and 40s. So that's the story about U.S. Senator Garrett Davis and how he became the namesake of Davis County, Iowa. I'm Nathaniel Gavronsky in Paris, Kentucky. Stay healthy, stay wealthy, and as always, stay wise, America.